You're right. Analysis is the base of everything. And that begins with understanding and having the mindset that it is the analysis that you do over the data that you have available to you. You need a mindset change to get ahead instead of lagging behind. If we leave the mindset of we want to educate anyone on a particular topic from the ground up type of fashion, then yes, you might end up in that situation where you just go, but
Hello everyone, my name is Maciej Nowak and welcome to the Awesome to Know podcast where we discuss all things related to building great websites. Today we are exploring the world of WordPress performance with our guest, Remkus de Vries, a performance optimization specialist who began his journey in 2010 when he encountered complex WordPress implementations that pushed the platform to its limits. As the co-founder of Scanfully and a respected voice in the WordPress community, Remkus has worked with sites handling millions of monthly page views and has developed a deep understanding of what truly matters for WordPress being fast beyond common misconceptions. And these misconceptions are extremely interesting because, for example, we will uncover why caching plugins don't actually solve all performance problems, the importance of understanding performance from the first principles rather than as an afterthought, and how to properly analyze your website to find the real bottlenecks. Remkus will share his perspective on hosting choices, the recent improvements in WordPress core and WooCommerce, and why education about performance fundamentals is so critical in the WordPress ecosystem. If you don't want to miss new episodes and keep learning about WordPress, please subscribe to our newsletter at awesomestudio.com/newsletter. This is osomstudio.com/newsletter. If you are watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel and give us a thumb. This means a world to us. Without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Remkus de Vries.
Hey everyone, it's good to have you here. We're glad you decided to tune in for this episode of the Awesome to Know podcast.
Hi Remkus, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Also well, I think at least. So yeah, that's weird answer, but I think I'm doing okay. All right. So, but I'm very excited that we can talk about performance today. I was looking forward to this conversation, and I would like to start with the like a general question. What drew you to the performance of WordPress? Because you seem to be very interested in performance. This is our discussion today, topic of discussion. So I'm curious, what made you be interested in performance and not something else?
That's a good question. I think this kind of started around 2010 when the types of clients that I was having were roughly in the more complex type of sites. At that point, we started having WordPress 3.0, which allowed for custom posts and taxonomies. And then a new client of ours had a very, very complex request, which basically meant we were implementing about 10 different custom post types, and I think about double of that in custom taxonomies. Now, when you combine, and most people don't know this, but if you want to, for instance, if you want an archive of tags and then combine an archive of tags, basically you take the slug of the archive of the tag and then you hit the plus, then you can add another term to it. So you get the combination of the two as one archive. And we were seeing that this was causing issues. So we needed to dive into what's going on here and how can we fix this. And this sort of primed me in figuring out what is a query. I knew what a query was because I'd done SQL and all that sort of stuff. But that sort of primed me into let's figure out this performance thing before instead of fixing it at the end.
All right, yeah, that's interesting. And looking at this from this perspective, do you think a lot has changed since that time when when you initially got into performance and now how do you look at this from a perspective?
So yes, a lot has changed. It's a bit of a double-edged sword because on the one hand, performance in general has gotten a lot better. Certainly, the acknowledgement that this is something we need to focus on has gotten way bigger. But applications and WordPress is an application, and then plugin that extend that application have gotten more complex, have gotten more careless as well, because if the bulk of the sites you built them for just have very low traffic, you run a good chance of never running into performance issue. However, I have quite a few clients that are doing millions of page views a month. They will know it really, really fast, right? If there's a plugin that has a performance regression, they'll be the first to tell me. In fact, I'll be the first to see it because we're monitoring for that. This is one of the reasons I founded Scanfully with my co-founder Barry. But the idea behind it is you want to know now, and everybody seems to understand that mindset better now than they did. It's 15 years ago. I realize, so that the awareness being pushed by Google, indicating that performance is part of the mix. Having things like Core Web Vitals, having Lighthouse 2-hour availability. For instance, in WordPress now, for the last 3 years now, we have the WordPress core performance team. So there's a lot of focus on performance now. So that has gotten a lot better. But it's still shocking to learn that one of the things I learned 15 years ago is that caching doesn't solve your performance. Caching enhances what is cacheable, but a lot of stuff isn't cacheable. A lot of stuff basically invalidates parts of your cache or your full cache. So there's a lot of stuff that you should know it, but it's just not common knowledge. So when I say uh, the the plugin you just installed that is supposed to solve your caching doesn't solve your caching your performance problem, I still get wide eyes like, what? It's a caching plugin. Of course it is. Eh, there's a strong case to be made that it does, and there's a stronger case to be made that it doesn't.
What you said, that the awareness is growing, I have
Yeah.
a feeling this is very true. At the same time, because we have the tools, we have the PageSpeed Insight, we can very easily measure the performance of the website. Yet, I have a feeling, that's my second feeling, that the performance is judged only after the website is done.
Yeah.
So that it's tested by those tools, and instead of looking from the perspective from first principles, first step is or throughout the whole build, the performance is at the back of your head.
Yeah.
You do the website, not you, but the website is done, and then it's tested, and then, oh my god, let's do what? Cache, install WP Rocket, and so on. So this is my maybe not very fair judgment, but this is what I think is happening.
I think it's a fair assessment. This is exactly the type of stuff that I'm being hired to fix. There's people who I gave the example yesterday to somebody where I basically say, look, there's sites that I come across that have a page builder active, sure, and adding a page builder already means your site is slower because the plugin has to load on top of WordPress, which by pure definition cannot be faster. Now you can make it negligible, and that's what you should want to have. But then I see like 5, 6, 7 different plugins hooking into that page builder, adding all their templating and all of the logic and all that. And then they find it weird that their site with just 1,000 WooCommerce products is just slow on every single page load. Yeah, of course, there's 4 or 5 plugins competing for process power to render what needs to be rendered. That's very much a thing.
Mm-hmm. So why is this happening in the first place?
I think there's this largely stems from that it's relatively easy to start with WordPress, right? Where in certain contexts we can we can almost be seen as a no code solution, because if you don't want to touch code, you can. And that means people start with building stuff without fully grasping what it is that they're doing. Um, and if you continue, and then the site continues to grow because it's acceptable what you can achieve, then you start building sites that become more popular, start generating more revenue, and all that sort of stuff. It then, much later in the journey, becomes more evident that you've chosen the wrong path, because you're finding yourself having to fix, all the weird niggles and uh, just dumb stuff that you go like, why didn't I know this? You then have to have the insight that whatever you know now is not enough to bring the site to the next level, and you have to have an active mindset of, this is what I want to fix. So you need somebody who wants to embrace the professional mindset that actually goes with it. And I think it's the combination of those things: low barrier to entry. You can go fully no code if you want to. We have page builders that facilitate that for you, and then you end up with sites that are just not built in a lean and mean fashion. And if that's not your mindset, if that's not part of your core belief that this is how it should be, because I'm aware of the maintenance hell I'm creating if I don't, then yeah, you're just making more complex sites than you need to. And then there's false narratives where certainly on the performance side of things, there's a lot. If you Google from how do I make WordPress faster, you'll find a bunch of tutorials who are just listing the same stuff that I wrote about in 2007 and 8, which is by far no longer applicable anymore. But you'll still see the same things because, nobody really understands what they're doing. You just like to have an article out there that explains or hints that they do. So it's hard to find information that helps you level up.
So to get into your senses, but why is this the case? Because of it's easier to reproduce, the same kind of content all the time, all over the, and so you have a feeling of building your SEO on your website so that you
Yep.
must produce such content, and you lack knowledge. No one has that knowledge. No one wants to share real nitty-gritty details of how to get better performance.
I think it's the thing. We have to agree that is the conclusion we can make, because if you look into just core web vitals as a thing to measure, the vast majority of people don't really understand that if they go to their browser and go to inspect and then find the lighthouse section where they can run the 5 tests on their site, that what they're seeing is a lab test. And what I mean with a lab test, it is nowhere near what is actually happening on your site. It is a localized, on your machine, lab test over the connection that you have. Yeah, you can throttle and you can simulate and all these things, but ultimately what you're getting is not real data. It's a good indication of where your data is, but it's technically possible to build a site that scores perfectly for all the core web vitals, but actually is horrendous to use. You can build a site like that, and vice versa is also possible. You can have a blazingly fast site that doesn't register as a perfectly 5 times 100. So if we don't understand those types of basics, if we don't understand that when you're generally looking at the performance of your site, we're testing the cached version of that site. If that's not a thing, then it's very hard to then start diving into, okay, if that's the case, then what do I need to understand better so I understand performance better and understand caching better? Caching has many, many layers, and it's a plugin that does caching, turns your site into a static version, is basically what I should say, can most certainly aid the performance of your site, but it's not a solution. It's not a one-stop solution. You have there's cache invalidation, there's a cache hit ratio, there's people who are logged in, there's people who come in through um, uh, tracking parameters behind the URL. All of those things invalidate cache, and then you're talking raw performance. And if we allow people to not understand the consequences of that, and then they have subpar hosting, then that combination just, it compounds. It becomes more and more difficult to start. Where do I start to understand what this actually is? And to answer your very first question, that's that first example got me into performance, and me wanting to help people understand performance better is what keeps me in, which is why last year I started more on the education side of things, and which why I'm going to double down on that. I'm developing courses. I'm in preparation to really take off with my YouTube channel, all in the pursuit of helping people understand their tools. And performance is a part of that. Security is a part of that. But also, which tools are you using to develop? All of these things come at play at how do I create the most optimized, the most performance, the most scaling, the best accessible, all of these metrics that you should take into account. How do I build those sites? And people are not talking about that. They're talking about here's a solution, click my affiliate link, and I'm happy.
Yeah, they are trying to solve the problem, right?
And that,
The,
yeah, but are you solving a problem if the problem is not solved at the root, or
or like,
are you solving a consequence of the problem?
I read it somewhere over Twitter that you can sell vitamins or you can sell ibuprofen, and one is helping you, grow better body, let's say, or it builds you, right, and the other one covers problems.
And I would go even further and say, start fixing what you put in your body, as in real food, unprocessed, raw food, as much as possible, because you'll get more in starting from there. Then you're not adding disruptors to the mix, because food is a wonderful example of how you can basically screw up your entire system. Most people don't know that however they're feeling during the entire day, week, whatever, is based on how they're feeding themselves. So whatever's in your gut is what determines how you feel. And the same can be drawn as a parallel to WordPress. If you don't know what you're feeding it with, what the basis is of what it uses, so from server level to plugin level, and to whatever's in front of there, all of these things determine how healthy you feel.
And then you have to eat a lot of ibuprofen to to get
Yeah,
your day by, right?
and at a certain point, when ibuprofen doesn't work anymore, you may want to switch over to diclofenac.
Of course. And then the spiral gets
Exactly.
only faster.
Exactly.
So most of the time we are landing in a situation that there is a problem that we need to solve because ibuprofen is no longer an option, right? So we have what we have. We have a slow website, and now the mindset to apply to that problem is analytical mindset, right? So you have to understand what's causing this pain so that you can backtrack and come to a solution where you have to change your diet, let's say. But what I'm trying to say is that if you come to a situation where you have a very slow website, as you're helping client or whatever, you have to do the analysis. So let's say you are switching that caching plugin, and what do you do? Like, how people should think where to look for problems in, because we talked about the lighthouse. This is lab test. Real performance is different things, and different thing, and vice versa. So how to start looking at this from the analytical perspective so that you can draw right conclusions and look for traces of problems that you can attack.
You're right. Analysis is the base of everything. And that begins with understanding and having the mindset that it is the analysis that you do over the data that you have available to you. So in the case of a lighthouse result, you hopefully your site has enough traffic so it's registered in Google's CRUX reports, because Crux reports has real user RUM. I forget what the M stands for. But RUM measurement of your traffic is real. That means that's what the people who visited your site actually experience. It'll tell you which is the slower part, and you'll have ways to figure out how to make that part faster. There's plenty of documentation available for you to dive into that. So here's the thing, right? So I can make a long list of things that what type of analysis you should do, but the very base of it is you are willing to dive in, you take the time, and you learn more about the topic that you are discovering. This is hindering me. So Crux is an example. Server logs, slow queries, access logs, all of these things tell you something of what's going on. I'll give you an example that's fairly easy to debug. Let's say you have a WooCommerce site. Let's say you've done a lot of optimizing. You know you have a lean and mean theme. You know you're taking care of the whole build process, remembering I'm building for performance, for scalability, remembering that when somebody is logged into their store, no, even sooner, as soon as they add something in their cart, the rest of their journey on your site is no longer cached, which means my raw metal needs to be fast. I need to have a high performant server. All of that is taken care of, and yet you have a slow WooCommerce site. So what's going on? One of the things I find quite often is on every single page load, there's a plugin that does something behind the scenes that it shouldn't do on every single page load. A good example is a license check. So if you have a premium solution and the license check for that particular premium plugin isn't cached for the day, the week, whatever, then you have every single page load go off to a server offsite that has absolutely nothing to do with the experience you're having as a visitor on that e-commerce site. And yet you are slowed down because that lookup not only is happening so often, so frequently, that server is also having a hard time. Maybe they are cached on their end, maybe they're not. But that whole journey just adds 1 or 2 seconds to every single page load. Now, if you know that that's a thing that can happen, it is no longer rocket science that if you discover that a plugin does that or doesn't handle this properly, you have a slow site, because that's just the nature of the thing. If your page load includes something that needs to be loaded offsite that doesn't directly impact you but is there, then that's going to have a negative impact. So the simple solution for this is understanding that you have a transients API inside of WordPress, which means anything you request from the server, from the database, from external, whatever, can be stored inside your database. And hell, you can even make it a flat file if you prefer, for whatever reason, if you don't want to bother the database. But you can store whatever you retrieved for a predetermined period. And then instead of doing that lookup for the license, just that's done once. And then if you're using object caching, which I hope you are, then it's a no-brainer. That license check lives in object cache and is only retrieved once per day, freed up once per day, and then queried again. So that's the next 24 hours. That lookup is no longer a problem. So thinking in those terms is a mindset and is an understanding of how things work. And for that, you need to have the understanding to look at your logs, to look at the network tab on your inspector. Most people just kind of look at what they can change in CSS, and maybe if they're told, look at console for bugs and errors. But that's, it's not even half the story. There's just so much more information there. So one of the ideas I'm playing with, and I've kind of decided already, is that I also want to do a course built around how to actually use that DevTools Chrome Inspector, however you want to call it. Because there's so much information in that thing alone, and that's not even taking care of the log information that you have. But those are two examples of how you have problems that some of them are documented, some of them are just realizing what it is that's actually happening. and from there you start building your knowledge. But it's this type of knowledge is quite known for agencies that are doing enterprise, big business type of sites, because the first thing they're going to see if they don't is that their site goes down as soon as they switch it to production, right? So as soon as traffic starts hitting, we're very fast to learn that this was not the most performant solution. Within 5 minutes, you'll have signals. Within the hour, you will know for sure. So agencies that are very much accustomed to this, they know this. They have internal knowledge. They have somebody, you write the code, somebody else checks it, all those things. If you're not in that position, or if you have a small team, it means you need to rely on external information for the most part. And I'm jumping in this gap because I see it, and I've seen it for over a decade now. The information being shared by people who actually understand what they're doing is just scarce. It's not, for some reason, it's never been given a high priority.
Or maybe it's the secret sauce and it's not being shared because
Possibly,
it's not.
possibly, yep, yeah. That's a good one. I think that's a very fair assertion to say that, oh, we don't want, we'll happily share stuff, but we don't share this because that's part of our secret sauce. This is how we make our servers fast. No, this is how you build fast, period. But yeah, it's things like that that make it very difficult for if you are a small agency and you're heavily reliant on whatever stack that you build as tools that you use, and you're heavily reliant on stuff that just you kind of click your way through. Um, it it allows you for you to never really touch the problem because you're depending on the solution to fix the problem before you're aware that there is a problem to be fixed. Um, this is a difficult thing. It's why, for instance, in the Lighthouse, one of the things that they look for is diffitis. So how many diffs are you using for that little button you added? If there's 10 diffs just to make sure you have a button in a specific place, Lighthouse will tell you your structure is too deep. It makes zero sense. Um, but
And this is a skill issue with the developers creating such a layout that
yeah,
is
I think so.
ending up in such a huge nest, right?
I think the skill issue actually starts with those who are building the tool. If you're a marketing company and you figure out there's a technical solution to facilitate your marketing efforts, you end up building a product. And that product is perfect, but it's from a marketing perspective. If you do not have somebody on your team who has a hardcore and deep understanding of performance and best practices and all those things, how are you going to know? You're not. So you're building a solution that's perfect for marketers. It's shiny, it's bright, and it does all these things. And then you have everybody else copying you. But you end up with a subpar project because it was never built from a performance first perspective. Um,
And I have a feeling that there are only two options there, like two ways. You end up with customer base selling that product to with a customer base that is not big, not huge. Like they are not big accounts that have big traffic because otherwise it invalidates the whole product. You just remove the product, you switch to another provider, or you ramp up your game and do the performance of the product correct. Like
and that just requires an entirely different mindset. I strive to do the best version of the work that I can do. I'm human; doesn't always work, but that's how I'm built. That's how I'm wired, and that's how I've taught myself to continue to do what I do. Again, I make mistakes just like the next person, but you need to sort of agree with yourself that you want to try and find the best version of you, of your product, of your, if you're talking to someone and you've explained them in three different ways and they still don't get it, that means it's most
the
likely
teacher is the problem.
exactly. So if you go like, no, I am the teacher, I've told you in three different versions and you don't get it, so you're dumb. um, there's two people losing out: you in how you teach, and them in never receiving the information they desperately wanted to have because they tried two more times. So yeah, it's an education thing. It's a mentality thing. And in some cases, you can argue that I ran into it and that is what triggered me. But I think if you're doing this work for, and this being building websites for a variety of different types of clients, you'll find within the year, you'll find something that wasn't performant. Like I have no doubt that you're coming across it. So if you then just offloading it and just patching it, whichever way you've discovered that that's acceptable, yeah, it's hard to leave that mentality and then go like, no, let me fix this proper.
And fixing and doing this the right way is also, like we discussed before, more costly. It takes time, more skills, or no?
I think it's costly to a point. So is it
Of
costly?
course, but yeah, but what I want to say is that initially, until like it's only in the future. Like unless I know I will have a very big store with a lot of traffic, maybe or maybe not, I will hit the problem. So let's cut all of the corners and worry when we will have customers, which is a good problem to have, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, in a way that makes sense to approach things because that's a very pragmatic way to go about it. That said, if you don't educate yourself on the subject matter, irrespective of what you're encountering in your work, then you're always a couple of steps behind, not one step, a couple of steps behind. And this is the when you want to level up. This is when you say, "No, I am a professional," which means I am taking care of my education. Yes, I'm aware there's a lot of information coming my way. Yes, this means I need to read change logs. Um, yes, this means I employ different ways of validating the things that I think that are the facts. You have to have a curious mind, and if you don't have a curious mind, you need to find your curious mode. But you need to have something of, I don't know this yet. Good. That means that's something I need to start exploring.
But like I have a feeling that the curiosity is the scarce most scarce ingredient in human nature. I don't know, maybe I'm somehow biased, but all of what you say I totally agree, and it's not like I'm saying let's cut corners. Like the opposite way, we
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we optimize our clients too. What I have a feeling is that to find that inner curiosity, how to do stuff better, is so rare. It's extremely rare
I agree. I agree.
because this is natural. Like through such curiosity, you get better. You are in a constant improvement mode because it's not is like this is the way you get better, right? Your curiosity drives you to do things differently and you learn from the experience. If you don't have that, you can be forced, you can be pointed to resources, you may be forced to learn, and the speed of that learning is totally different. It's like replaying something instead of recording that something for someone else. It's like maybe bad parallel, but like it's so much different when you are driven by that curiosity. The effects are like enormously different than if you're forced to do anything. That's why I was referring to this, because it's so rare that like I have a feeling that like this is perfect recommendation for someone who is already on a level that you don't have to teach that to that person. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I totally get what you mean. So I've known since I was about 11, I think 10, 11. It's when I first started. Um, I was 10, and my mom said to me, "There's this typing course that's going to be in town. I think you should do that." And I was like, "Why would I need to learn how to type? I have no desire to become a secretary or anything like that." She goes, "No, but I have a feeling that these computer things are going to be huge." And this is 83.
Prophet mom.
Yeah. So she kind of forced me there. Once, first, second lesson, I kind of got it. It's kind of cool to be fast and not having to look. So I learned blind typing. Very shortly after that, I learned that I have something that most people don't have. I have the curiosity on wanting to understand how that thing worked, and there's this computer. How does that work? So I started doing things with the computer nobody else was doing, and there was zero information. You had a few books here and there, but there were no online forums. There were no people you could talk to. You had to figure it out. So I would spend hours and hours applying. Because after the typing course, I did the basic course at the same company. That's how I learned how to play with. So if you've learned that you have a curiosity in you, then there's ways to make sure that curiosity stays active and how you build upon it. If you find yourself like, I want to, but I don't really put time and effort to it, you have a discipline problem. You have curiosity, but you have a discipline problem. So how do you fix discipline? Start lifting heavy weights. It's a very simple answer, but doing anything with weights in an ever increasing fashion, that will teach you discipline. If you then still find yourself like, I know I need to do this, and I do this regularly, and I force myself to, but I can't find myself, then you're probably not doing the work you should be doing, because you're just not having enough energy and you're not being energized by it enough. Now, I'm being very generic, right? It's not 100%. This is the only option out there. But at a certain point, you have to make the conclusion that if you're not actively teaching yourself to learn, then you are one step behind all the time. Now, can you make an honest living with that mindset? Sure. Until you don't. I think we're slowly but surely entering the phase where the professionalism that kind of started in my mind around, about 10 years ago, sort of started pushing in that direction. And I feel we're moving faster and faster in that direction now. But it's probably going to take more than anywhere between 5 and 10 years for that to become the dominant mindset. That if you do not treat this thing from a very serious mindset, then you're just not going to be able to jump in. Because that combined with no code solutions, I think, is the split we're going to see. So
not to mention all of the LLMs helping you code.
Yeah.
Vibe code, as it's recently called,
Yeah.
to vibe code your thing without making syntax mistakes, and second comment would be to optimize
But
stuff.
you can say the same problem there, right? If you've never been diving deep into what is a prompt and what is the presupposition that goes into the prompt that is actually being executed in the context that you meant it, if you didn't write that out in like 2 pages, you're not really doing what you can be doing. So you'll see the same divide happening there. There's people who can just sort of happenstance themselves into solutions. But if they've never told the AI to say, look, I want you to build me this, but I want you to keep performance in mind. I want you to do don't repeat yourself type of approaches, and I want you to have security and all of these things. Then you'll still end up with a subpar project, which will still end up with the problems you have now. You need a mindset change.
What I was trying to say is that instead of like, maybe I'm delusional, but instead of hiring subpar developers, subpar freelancers, that will build you a website that is very mediocre, I have a feeling that that subpar people will be replaced by marketers on the client side doing their work, vibe
Yeah, I think.
coding, and having the same results, but not paying for weeks of development, encapsulating this in a 1-day session with LLM, vibe coding their website with the same problems as they would get by 3 years earlier doing this with a subpar developer. So I'm not saying that yeah, so quality is the same, the cut is not halved, it's 20 times less effort to build the same thing as 3 years ago, let's say.
Yeah, I think you'll see the same problems arise in smarter tools. You need a mindset change to get ahead instead of lagging behind. And AI is a good example of how you can perfectly mask that you are still behind. Because if you don't know how to explain the thing by using good design principles on both the UX side and the code side of things, then what are you really doing? You're creating something that, if it gets successful, you'll end up having problems because you didn't build it to be successful. You build it to do, at bare minimum, what you told it to do. And yeah, that is basically the same problem, but just in a different.
I think this is the same thing that some companies are suffering from right now. It's just one level, like there's one layer removed, which would be the sloppy developer. You end up with the same problems. It's just someone else is the creator of that solution because it couldn't happen before. Now it can happen, and we would be having the same conversation, but not about the developers that are not wanting to learn and improve their stack, improve their skills, but rather marketers who would be or indie makers or people who would be operating these tools or for their companies or for their startups. So they would be the object of our conversation, and this conversation would be aimed for how to make them more educated, and then we will be talking about the future, which would be totally different, and then I don't know what it be.
No, I agree. I think that's exactly what it is. It's we're just moving around in what is the problem area. So as with anything in life, if you don't understand what the root cause of it is, you're never going to fix the root cause. And it doesn't really matter how you then do whatever you do. And this does not just pertain to code. This is life. If you don't actively want to look for how do I fix my problem, if we're looking back at the food, if you stuff your mouth full with, a lot of additives that 50 years didn't even exist in food, it's no wonder at some point you're going to find yourself with certain illnesses that are attributed to the ingredients you ingested. If you don't care to fix that,
you mentioned that you have to have that knowledge about principles, about what can be a root cause. Now we are in a situation where a lot of development is done by people who are curious, want to invest their time in exploring these LLMs, cursors, and all of that stuff. And there are two groups of people, from what I observe, is that there are developers who are professional developers and doing side gigs, trying to explore stuff and doing real projects, like 100 times faster, for a small demo, but they leverage their understanding of development principles. And there's second group that has zero knowledge, don't care about anything, and write prompt and hit enters, write prompt and like doing nothing else, and they might be achieving similar results. And now what we are now discussing is how to improve what is done in a bad way, for which you have to have the understanding of the root, let's say, principles, like of how to build stuff that is accelerated by AI and LLMs. Where these younger generations will get that knowledge if only what they will know will be LLMs, like prompting and so on. So where do you get that understanding of the world, of the first principles, if you can do so much so quickly that to invest in backtracking to where we are right now takes years, and you can do so much stuff such quickly?
I get it. So everything everything you mentioned is basically dependent on the educational process that goes before that. Meaning, if whatever level of education you're doing, and it does not touch the reality of the world right now, and helps you wrestle your mind through the decisions that have to be made before you actually start writing your first line of code or your first line of prompt, whatever you want to call it. If you don't understand what you're doing, you're never grasping it. So that needs to be part of the education, um, if your intent from a young age is to do this work. Now, the vast majority of certainly my generation, I'm 51, they didn't start with the ideas I'm going to do computer science or computer studies or develop or whatever you want to call it. There's still a very large contingent of people who are stumbling upon this work, liking it, and then decide to do a career change and progress. That is of all the ages, I think, from what I've seen. At some point, we're going to have to agree that if we're doing this, we're going to say to ourselves, we want to do this as professional as possible. And there is no shortcut for that. So that means in some way we need to, as educators, people talking about the topics, talking about the principle of understanding the root of all, that we need to sort of say to each other, look, if you're teaching here and but you're not explaining that, you are not a good teacher. So the thing that's going to start taking off, in my opinion, is educators will become much more of a determining factor in the trajectory of whomever is walking in a particular direction that has code involved. Does that mean the educators should say, look, hold on, before we actually dive into it, this is the reason why we're doing it this way? Yeah, exactly. That is exactly what is needed. So a lot of, if you look on YouTube, there's a bunch of tutorials where you just straight jump into. So here's where you install the plugin, activate it, and let's look at what the plugin does. Now, hold on. I know it's less sexy, but if we don't explain why we chose this particular plugin to solve that particular problem, then what are we really doing? We're just spending time on explaining something for views or for clicks or whatever. We're not educating. So I think bottom line, everything is dependent on the quality of the education, whether that is officially in school, college, university, all that, or somebody doing a course, somebody doing explainers on bottom layer topics, so you get to work yourself through bottom layer all the way to the top, like, okay, but this is what I'm experiencing, and so okay, and now I know how to trace it back because I'm aware that there's a root cause that I haven't seen yet or haven't touched yet. If we don't explain that principle, how are people going to know?
I was listening today to a podcast with a gentleman who is Y Combinator partner, and let's say he's not deep in the AI, but what he said is, because of the situation he's observing, he said that he has nothing to teach to his children. He has one or two children, and he was discussing this with his wife, and he said, we don't have anything we can teach our children except for attitudes. So curiosity, that they can act on what they want, like these type of like fundamental behaviors, but no knowledge. Like maybe it's far-fetched, but it
Uh,
made me think.
I don't agree. Yeah,
Okay.
no, I don't. I think as a parent, I have 3 kids, all of them officially adults now. The teaching never stops. It's still ongoing. So they're 18, 24, and 25, 26. Whatever information is out there is just part of means of getting information into somebody. Sure, you can tell your kids, learn how to do critical thinking. And this is what critical thinking is. But to then go, okay, hands off, just figure out the rest because the information
I,
about it is available. That's
I'm
a
not.
shortcut.
I don't think he was feeling like he doesn't have a job to do the teaching with their kids. It's rather all of the like useful things he can teach them in a couple of years' time won't be as relevant. Like this is his stance, right? That I'm opposing to your stand, where the teaching has to be in fundamentals. Like what he said is that if you have a set of proper behaviors and life attitudes, you will be good because we will help you. But you can't teach a craft to no one these days, because before they get to the, let's say, market, this will be either obsolete or not useful, let's say, or it can be done 10 times faster or whatever, right? So because now everything accelerates so fast, we don't know. Like, for example, I have a 1.5-year daughter, and I'm talking to her in English because I believe that it will make her life easier, that she will get a better start, with a second language, let's say. What I heard, exactly the same week I started doing that, is that there is 0 point in teaching our children English. We do this from a psychologist, I think it was, but he said that, but this is what we know and we want best for our children, but this is totally irrelevant in 15 years time, because this problem will be solved and this won't be ever like a point of discussion. Yet we all we do these kind of things because we want best for our children, and we don't know what will happen. We can't envision that future, and we want to pass to our kids what we know, and we know only this, right?
For me, that's a very minimalistic, very scarce way of looking, a non-holistic way of looking what teaching is, and certainly towards kids. Just you interacting with your kid is something your kid needs. So, regardless of what the topic is that is being discussed and being taught, if we were to say, we only need to do this on the behavioral level, and then the rest of the information is less relevant because it will be irrelevant. I don't believe that's the case. There's also a very large, difference in topics some folks enjoy and some folks don't enjoy. There's plenty of craftsmen. We are certainly seeing on school level that there's a lot more returning to craft work back again. Um, you know, will it be the same as it was 20 years ago? No, but it certainly isn't so that everything that we learn now is going to be obsolete in 5, 10, 15 years. I don't believe in that theory, not one bit. Which is why I uh, am still of the opinion and still acting on, if we leave the mindset of we want to educate anyone on a particular topic from the ground up type of fashion, then yes, you might end up in that situation where you just go, but now you only need to know this. But um, this is a worst case scenario. But what if we have an EMP pulse and all electronics is gone? How will you manage then? Will you survive? I know for a fact that I will, because I'm teaching myself how to do things that are not related to this thing that I'm looking at right now. Um, you know, I think that's a mindset thing. As a principle, I just don't agree with limiting in any way, shape, or form the types of education that you can do.
Yeah, I'm not sharing these opinions. I'm trying
Oh,
to.
I know, but I'm saying I'm processing what you're saying as
Yeah, okay.
as a point of view of looking at the world. I don't agree with that world. Yeah, maybe it's an age thing. I was born in the '70s, so I've seen other stuff. I've seen a world without technology. I've lived in it, and even though this is my bread and butter now, um, I'd be just as happy to do something that has absolutely zero to do with the computer. It's one of the hobbies that I had that turned into work, and I like doing it, but there's other hobbies as well.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, and I find this interesting to be able to bounce off these ideas, which are, I would say, on a very if you look at the spectrum, they are very to the right. So they are very far on the spectrum of what you can do and how you can approach the education problem, right? So this is for me, this is very interesting to be able to have a chat about this with someone who is maybe not a professional teacher, right? But in the mindset of teaching professional things.
Yep.
Yeah.
Before I did this work, I did a lot of professional teaching. So
Oh,
just not at
my
schools.
mistake.
Yeah, yeah. No, but I've done many courses and trainings teaching them. So from simple stuff to learning how to work with Microsoft Project to project management itself to Excel uh, and Word for advanced users. Some of them are technology related. Some of them have to do with time management. Some of them have to do with mind mapping. All different type of topics that I've for years was the primary thing of what I did. So
All right. Yeah. So I wasn't aware about. I
it's not
wasn't
something
aware
I
of this.
talk about all that much in the WordPress
Okay.
world. So you would
Sure.
have had to dive deep in my LinkedIn probably. I think there's some evidence of there.
Evidence. I like the word. Yeah. There's the evidence. All right. But we have went into the AI leg, which I like doing very much. But I think we haven't exhausted the performance area, and I'm thinking about like a little bit like. mm Pragmatic things. For example, imagine you're a CMO. You are a marketer in a big organization, and you might even have an external agency instead of your own team inside the company. But what would you say to a CMO with e-commerce platform to look for, or how to judge the agency work? Like being not very like rooted in technology, because you are a marketer, you have some kind of knowledge. But what would you say to such a person, how to evaluate their e-commerce platform?
Hire a specialist.
Okay.
It's very simple because I'm going to have to assume that if by now at that level of being a CMO you haven't dived into the technical side of things, you're never going to. And if that's what's happened, then you also need to come to the conclusion that you need to hire a specialist to do that for you.
You
So
have to realistically assess your capabilities. Like
you should.
I'm not. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If you don't understand where your boundaries lie in terms of what you understand of where you have an interest for, then you can assume and you can be cocky and you can go for it, but you'll never have the insight that somebody that has lived through it, trained for it, optimized all the facets of that work, not even the outcome of it, but the actual how do I do my things. So if a CMO says, I'm the one to determine this, then he's missing the opportunity to look for a CTO.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
I've worked at very large companies, 15,000 people, uh, and you would have just on the IT side of things, you would have a software architect, you would have a systems architect, you would have a process manager, you would have a application designer, you would have a UX designer, you would have all these small subtasks divided into core um, job defined roles where you would actually have one, two, three, four people just doing software architecture. If you've never looked into what a software architect does, you'll be, uh, you'll be surprised at the level of depth that they go into that particular topic. Uh, and for a CMO to assume that he or she understands that particular role and all the implications is ludicrous. So yeah, I have a very simple mindset in this particular type of scenario. If you find yourself being limited by knowledge in an area where you don't know and don't care enough to add it to your itinerary of things to learn and to control and manage and all that, then hire somebody who does. And there's plenty of people who will be the part-time CTO for your company if that's something you can only have 16 hours for somebody to do. uh, that shouldn't be the issue. If If you want to improve, then you need to understand where your boundaries are, your company's boundaries, what your teammates can and cannot do. If you do not have that sort of self-assessment, I don't think you'll ever be a thriving business to begin with. So,
Yeah, that's like you can't lie to yourself. Basically, you
well,
have
you
to.
can, and you can fill your life with that, but if you're being truly honest to yourself, then you'll know you're hitting boundaries and limits, and it must feel uncomfortable in more than one way.
I wanted to also I wanted to switch gears a little bit and go a little bit back to the technology side of things, because I'm curious about your opinion on the full site editing. Like we talked a little bit about lean and mean theme and vice versus some kind of a page builder. And how do you assess the plain not plain but the full site editing? How do you think, what's your opinion, maybe like broad opinion on the from the performance perspective?
So it's the most performant. I think it's two versions back. 6.5 WordPress 6.5. I think started making full site editing themes faster than classic themes. So from a performance standpoint, and assuming the theme is actually built according to standards, that is an important clause. Uh, I think full site editing is fast and faster. Um, it's a wonderful tool to work with. It's unfortunately not fully mature. It's mature enough. You can build complex sites with the full site editor, the site editor. That said, there are many UX things lacking, things unclear, or high maintenance, high effort to build. For instance, if there's a, if you thought of a different way to do the biography of an author at the bottom uh, of an article, then right now you most likely need to duplicate the existing one, recreate it, extend it, and add all the things. And that's a lot of extra overhead in a way. And you'll need to build it in a way that I don't like doing. For instance, I don't like React based. I don't care for React. I don't care to dive deeper in JavaScript. That's never my thing. I understand it fine, but I don't like building in it. If that's acceptable to you, because you'll build it in most likely ACF and have your blocks just built in PHP, as I think it should have been in the first place. Then the site editor is a perfectly acceptable place to build a site in. Understand its limits in its current state, then you'll be hard pressed to find scenarios where you say, no, I'm sorry, but I can't build this. If you can still use PHP, you can use conditionality, you can properly build complex PHP based flexible solutions inside a block, because it's still PHP then, if you use ACF as a base for your block generation. Then yeah, site editor is a wonderful product
All
with
right.
all the caveats that I just explained.
Of course. And I heard, I read recently that, for example, from touching on the core performance team being active, there was also a huge improvement in the WooCommerce number of queries, reduced from hundreds to 20, maybe
Yeah,
something like
WooCommerce
this.
9.7 has a tremendous performance gain in what the editor does, as well as what the application as a whole does. It's a huge step, and from what I know, talking to some of the WooCommerce crew themselves, this is just the first of many things they've identified in how to optimize Woo even further for performance. Yeah.
But when I think about 100 queries that could have been reduced to a handful, or two handful, let's say to
Yep.
a dozen,
Yeah.
it doesn't I don't know, but I'm picking on the word identified. Like it's like you identified a Mount Everest, for example, that was
Yeah.
standing in front of you.
So this is one of those things, right? If it's acceptable in a way for that to exist, and it doesn't hurt you in the way that it could hurt, so it's just hitting that threshold. So the amount of queries is not necessarily the issue, because what is a query is the same question as what is a house. If you live in a house that's 5 by 10, for some people that's acceptable. Other people need to have 450 by 50, a huge ass villa, right? So the query itself is not the issue. It's the efficiency that is being done. So can you simplify things? Well, oftentimes you can, but at what cost? We're currently in a state where WooCommerce has identified, and I think WordPress as well, with the previous query optimizations that have been done and the caching related to the queries. So WP Query has gotten a lot more efficient over the last, let's call it 2 years. Johnny Harris is, for instance, somebody who's done a lot of, let me figure out if we can optimize this. So all of these things are known, but some things are only, you only come across it because you're hitting a limit. And it's time and attention that you can give it. So if you're aware there's an issue, but there's higher priorities elsewhere, then that's what you do. You build it out. WooCommerce now focusing on this, WordPress now focusing on it. I think it's a lovely thing to see, because I think we're getting to the stage where, and this harkens back to one of your earlier questions, like, is it different now? Are people perceiving performance differently? Yeah, they are. They are taking it and treating it more seriously. Building lean and mean sites, having sustainability in the back of your mind, not wasting resources doing things they really ought not do that often, that heavy, that's become more of a forethought instead of an afterthought. And I like it. I mean, what's not to like? It's just making our applications snappier, faster, less prone to issues in other integrations into that particular function. Everything just becomes better. So,
So we've discussed a lot about the software layer, let's say, and I think we have to discuss the hardware layer, let's say. So
yep.
what would be like a proper hardware stack for I don't know. I know how much is a car question, but like for our listeners to understand, like, again, maybe first principles about thinking about hosting, because it's the market is so saturated with all kind of hosting providers.
Yep.
It's hard to decide. The like the offering is also like there's a table with a pricing tier, this and this number of space, bandwidth, stuff like this. Like
It's an interesting thing, because it goes back to the thread of this conversation, and that is, you need to look at the root. First thing is this: what does the site need? I don't have many videos on my YouTube channel yet. This is one of them, where I basically discuss, this is how you determine what hosting you should use. Because there's like 3, maybe 4 levels that you can look at, or where you can identify and say, this is a level that matches what I need. I'm a purist. I will pretty much always go for the fastest that I can find. But there's, that isn't necessarily exactly needed for all scenarios. So my dad's site gets 20 hits a week. It's fine. It doesn't need to be. I can optimize through caching. For him, there's not going to be a logged in person. And if somebody just happens to visit his site and it's, slightly less fast than it can be, it's not going to hurt anybody. So that's the bottom line. So there's hosting that matches that perfectly. Then there's slightly more needed. Let's call it the let's say there are 4 layers. Then there's the layer where there's a little bit more going on with the site and it needs to be somewhat fast and all that. So there's a different layer of hosting companies that serve that layer. Then there's what we begin to start calling the premium hosting companies. and let's say that the monthly rate is about 30-35 a month. That's where good hosting starts. And then there's the ultimate hosting, and that roughly starts at around $100 a month. So I'm hosting at the ladder. I have some sites in the mid tier, and I have some sites in the second tier. I have no sites at the base level because you get what you paid for. It's simple as that. The way to determine whether a hosting company is the good fit for you, in my mind, should be performance first. Now, in certain cases, if your knowledge is not up to par what happens on a server, the things you need to debug and all that, then you might be extremely reliant on support. So if the hosting company has excellent support, but kind of okay hosting, it's going to be perceived as one hell of a host. It's going to be a really good host because their support is absolutely fabulous. I don't care for support to be super fast or have an answer within 3 minutes because my questions are never going to be answered in 3 minutes. So I have a very different need for and determination of what is a good host. So the way I measure is where does this site need to go? Now, my preference is in the highest level because it'll just solve my problem on so many other levels as well. But the thing to do is to test bare metal. The thing to do is throw a site on there that you know to be complex and difficult on any platform, and you'll be able to tell how the raw metal behaves. There's a Kevin Ohashi who does a yearly roundup tests in a very proper scientific way of actually raw testing your performance under the name Review Signal or WP Hosting Benchmark or something. He has two domains basically, but the result of that is that you get an honest, not affiliate driven, because that's very important to mention. You get an honest review of the actual performance of your site, the raw performance. What does it actually perform like? And that's, in my opinion, the way it should be. Now, the rest is marketing. The rest is support. The rest is all these extra things. And I'm not saying that all hosts need to be at the level of the absolute blazingly fastest. But I think you mostly need to be aware that there's different levels servicing different crowds, basically.
Mm-hmm. I have him. I have him. I will dig deeper into this. This is very interesting.
I have it on my. I'm recording a podcast with him next week. So anybody listening to this one, do subscribe to my newsletter at withinwp.com, and in the newsletter, I will highlight the podcast as well. So
very good. We invite everyone to Remkus' newsletter. All right, so this will be very interesting extension to what we touched upon, like very extended version probably of which you can think about your hosting. All right.
yeah, and you should, because that's basically the way it works, right? There's thinking of any solution on the web being a one size fits all. That's just not the case. Same goes for plugin solutions. Same goes for backup solutions. Same goes for whatever topic you can think of. If your if your approach is that it has to be this one tool and that it's going to fit everything, that's just not how things work.
Mm-hmm. All right, Remkus, thank you very much for the discussion.
You're most welcome.
Yeah, and yeah, maybe we will see each other, on some kind of a, some WordCamp, or hopefully.
I'm sure we will.
All right. Thank you once again, and take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
If you like what you've just heard, don't forget to subscribe for more episodes. On the other hand, if you've got a question we haven't answered yet, feel free to reach out to us directly. Just go to awesomestudio.com/contact. Thanks for listening, and see you in the next episode of the Awesome to Know podcast.